Well, let's begin our debate by going straight to the Ethiopian capital, where we're joined by Yared Abera. He's the co-executive director of the Youth Negotiation on Climate Change Convention that was held in Addis Ababa. He was also Ethiopia's youth representative in the UN's COP23 and COP24 climate talks. In Rome, we have Marcelo Rezende. He's a land monitoring specialist at the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization. He's also the co-author of the study, The Global Tree Restoration Potential. And in Annecy, France, is environmental scientist Alexandra Jellicoe. She's the founder of Monkey Wrench, a blog covering environmental culture. Good to have you all on the Newsmakers. Yared, we read the headlines and it seemed extraordinary. Ethiopia seems to have done something quite miraculous here and very commendable. I'm sorry to sound a little bit skeptical. How can we be absolutely sure that Ethiopia planted 350 million trees in 12 hours?
It's an unbelievable phenomenon manifested. Definitely we planted, and also the Ministry of Innovation and Technology monitored the counting of the plantation, and we made a history in a single day, like planting 353 trees in a single day.
Yeah, 350 million trees in 12 hours. Now, and there's more to come according to Abiy Ahmed. Marcelo Rezende, all things considered, has Ethiopia done something that many countries should be doing?
Oh, definitely. I mean, with the urgency that we have to fight climate change, we do need to tackle all of our options. And as the paper says, planting trees is a big one of those options. And definitely other countries should be following Ethiopia's lead on this.
Right. Alexandra, big picture, if we plant billions of trees, but we continue to burn fossil fuels at the rate that we're currently burning them, would it make much of a difference?
Oh, gosh. I think there's some debate about the percentages of carbon sequestration of huge forest planting schemes. And I think it's about 25% that we could possibly, if we reforest huge tranches of the planet. My concern is that we really need to be divesting of fossil fuels at an extremely high rate, because we don't know the sustainability of these trees. We don't know if these plantations are going to survive. We don't know at the moment how the countries are planting the trees. I know that India had a huge planting exercise in 2017, and only 2% of those trees have survived, only 2% of the saplings.
Right.
So
Right. That's an interesting point. So I wonder, let me ask Yared, did the Ethiopians keep in mind that in beating the Indians to the record, or in surpassing the Indian record, did they keep in mind that only a small percentage of the Indian trees actually survived, and that there might need to be mechanisms to ensure that these seeds become proper trees?
Yes, the intention is not just simply to pass the world record, but it's not about just planting the trees. It's also growing the trees. You know, the initiative was initiated by the Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed. He just showed us by bowing down to the nature and teach us how to plant the trees. And also, it's not about just an event. I would like to make a point here that it's not an event. It's a process. You know, it's a reforestation process. And also, we already had a climate resilient green economy strategy that Ethiopia were putting for the climate to fight the climate change. So this is one of the pillars that Ethiopia made to address this program, this initiative. What makes this amazing is the Prime Minister took the initiative, and as I told you, he just bowed down to nature and showed us to mobilize the bigger public, bigger public. That makes it amazing.
And we've been looking at some very beautiful drone footage of the plan in action. Gorgeous green images, and I understand it came from the organization as well, and we thank you for that. It's been fascinating looking at all of that. Marcelo, is the view of this holistically, okay, this is just going to mitigate climate change for now, but this is one portion of a bigger project. Is that it?
Exactly. I mean, I really like
sure.
the hearing that it's not only about planting the trees, it's also about growing the trees. So the tending for those trees is very important because this is just one side of the problem, right? As mentioned well, we also have to cut our emissions. So if we don't cut our fossil fuel emissions, the planting of the trees might not be enough. We also have to transition to renewables, which is something that we've been doing slowly, but we could be so much better at it. Something that we should also pay attention after planting those trees or in choosing those trees is suitability for those areas, because we want to tap into all of these ecosystem services that trees could provide. And this should be looked into. I mean, choosing the right species could benefit a lot rural populations in the area. But as I said before, it's just like we have to tackle the problem from multi areas. This is a cross-sectoral problem. It's not only land use, but it's also a technological problem that we have to invest on.
Yeah. Alexandra, in a nutshell, just how much do we actually need trees? Because I think a lot of people have gotten to the point where people got to the point where they could understand, well, you know, perhaps we're creating this greenhouse effect and we have rising sea levels and the polar ice caps are melting. They just kind of got their heads around that, but maybe they forgot the fundamentals that we're also, with deforestation and chopping trees and so on, we're losing the lungs of the earth. How much do we actually need these trees?
Well, I think trees are absolutely fundamental to, one is for biodiversity. I mean, we're facing a huge biodiversity crisis. So the fact that we can solve the climate crisis by planting, you know, forests, multi-species forests, not monoculture forests, which has been going on. If we can tackle the climate crisis by improving biodiversity, then that can only be a really astonishingly wonderful thing. So I find Ethiopia's progress with this really remarkable. I mean, they really have made great progress. They've signed a climate resilient green economy. They're trying to make progress with that. They're planting lots of trees and they're showing real leadership in this sector, which is exciting. I think a lot of countries could learn from their example.
Yeah, as you say that, Alexandra, is the message to wealthier countries, and perhaps I can use the term Western countries as well, that if Ethiopia, with a lot of bigger problems than you have, can do this and can embark on this green initiative without saying, hey, we have other priorities. If they can have all that stuff that they still have to deal with, I mean, they almost had a failed coup d'etat recently, just a couple of months ago, right? They can have all the problems that they have, but they can still do this. Then you can do it as well in Europe or in the United States and elsewhere. Is that the message?
Well, I think our challenge in Europe and the United States is that structurally we are very dependent on fossil fuels, and the complexity of moving away from fossil fuels in terms of our transport sector, in terms of our energy sector, in terms of how we supply our food is very complicated. But it's something that we need to really start tackling right now and as quickly as possible. All the technology is available. It just requires the will to start making those changes.
Yared Abera, what's your message to the world as they watch you plant these hundreds of millions of trees?
Well, Ethiopia is a great country with a big history, you know, made another great history with regarding fighting climate change. So I call up to all countries, parties to do similar efforts that Ethiopia is doing right now. And also I would like to recall, you know, our effort is just a one country effort. So just to save the planet, we have to, you know, stand hand in hands and also fight these things by planting trees, similar kind of trees. For example, if we have seen the IPCC report in October, they mentioned the world needs 1 trillion trees by 2050s. So to achieve that, Ethiopia just started and took the initiative by being pioneer in planting 4 billion trees on this summer in just 3 months. So I call up to all countries to do similar efforts and to fight the climate change.
Okay, and I'm glad that Yared mentioned the IPCC. Let's have a little listen to them and broaden out the debate after that. Have a listen.
25 to 30% of food produced is lost or wasted, and reducing food loss and waste can reduce pressure on land, improve food security, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, a move to more balanced diets could help us adapt to and limit climate change.
So Marcelo, people see the IPCC report come out. It says global warming and land interact in a vicious cycle. So many bad things are happening at the same time, and things are going to get really, really bad. And right at the very end of that statement, we heard from the IPCC saying that we might have to change our diets. So the average person watching this is going, what the hell must I do? How on earth do I live? On the one hand, you're telling me, hey, don't drive your car. On the other hand, it's saying maybe go vegan. Is it a little bamboozling for the ordinary person to try and figure out just how they can make a difference in saving us from catastrophe?
It really depends on the person, right? So if you can address some of those problems, like reducing the amount of meat consumption or reducing the amount of time that you use your air conditioning, so all of those things, they could contribute to the bigger goal of fight climate change. Of course, if we all did this, we would have a bigger impact. But we also have to hold corporations accountable, because this is not only in the hands of the consumers, this is also in the hands of the producers. The message on the food waste is also an interesting number, because a big part of this food waste is done in storage and transportation. So it's not really at the consumption level. It's outside of the consumer's hands, the control against this food waste. So what's in our hands, we should do everything we can to reduce this carbon footprint that we have, but at the same time we should fight and press for different bigger organizations, bigger corporations should also do their part, and also contact our politicians and put pressure on them to pass legislations that could make the carbon something more valuable, so we can put bigger weight on it, so we can see the importance and the effects that we have when we disregard it.
Alexandra Jellicoe, the IPCC report, yet again, stark warning, and I have no solid reason to doubt the veracity of the report or the sincerity of the alarmism, right? In answering the question, where do you begin? Where does one start? How do you actually begin to tackle this crisis? Your answer is what?
For me, I think at an individual level, the most important thing is that you start taking an interest in the environment. I mean, in the UK, I think environmental matters in the media have had historically a very, very low priority. I think the government have definitely sidelined environmental matters. And I think the general public have been uninformed about the importance of what is going on. So it is only now, really, that people are waking up. And now that they are waking up, the biggest impact that they can make actually is talking to one another, talking to each other and saying, actually, we have a big problem here. What is it that we can do? Yes, we can do things at a personal level, but what are the companies or the political parties which are making a bigger problem? And who can we support in order to improve the situation? Are there more ethical companies out there? Can we buy our clothing from different places? Perhaps we can eat more of a plant-based diet. But which of our politicians are really going to take this problem seriously and lead us out of this problem?
And looking at the power dynamics here and the influence. So I can say, well, okay, I went vegan, I planted 100 trees, I stopped driving my car, and I stopped using air conditioning, but then the United States pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, and that's where the true difference is made. So what can I do? That's much bigger than me.
Well, I think the UK can show significant leadership with that. I think we use a lot of foreign aid is still being invested in fossil fuel economies, and we could change that. We could change the way that we are living within the UK and our politics in the UK. And I think by showing leadership, other countries want to follow. And I think at this point in the world and in our lives, we need great imagination. And anybody who is sharing that sort of imagination is creating a roadmap for others to follow. We can't do anything about the United States. It's a big shame that the United States have done that. But eventually, they were going to have to take the problem seriously. So they might be following us.
So Marcelo, is what Ethiopia has done a first sign of creating new realities and using their imagination to lead others along the way?
the attention that we had from the media to the case of Ethiopia is much larger than we had for the one in India before. And I see this as a trend. So countries are engaging, and this is very much volunteer based, which is the population coming forward with the government, with support from the government in doing this. So I see this as a beginning of a large and hopefully a very successful trend. We just wish that this is done in a forest evidence-based way, so
Right.
people choose the right species, the right locations.
Yeah,
We just want it to be done right.
Right. It's interesting. Marcelo, would countries only really take this seriously once their biggest and best experts start to tell them that this environmental stuff is going to threaten your food and political security just around the corner, so you need to do something about it?
Yeah, definitely. As Alexandra said, like people are being more aware of environmental impacts recently, and definitely we see a correlation of good environmental practices with success and sustainability in private corporations as well. So people see the advantages of protecting the environment, of having sustainable practices in agriculture and other land uses as well. And this is a way that investors could push. So they can see that if a country doesn't have a sustainable plan for the future, their money is in trouble. So
Right.
it is definitely a way for bargaining and like to make sure that countries engage in this type of work.
Yeah. Yared Abera, if Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and people such as yourself get their way over the next few years and are able to enact the environmental policies that you would like to see in Ethiopia, what kind of Ethiopia are we going to see in the next few years?
Well, I'm very optimistic. You know, we just started this beautification, greening Ethiopia initiative. This is one of an amazing initiative made by the Prime Minister. I am hoping that this initiative will jumpstart Ethiopian economy and also just will green up and beautify the Ethiopia. So I am hoping a very optimistic and more environmentally friendly Ethiopias in the next few years, in near future. And also we have to consider that just to add points on early questions, what happened here is, you know, the top-down approach. You know, the Prime Minister showed us how to plant and watch something grow. So similar kinds of efforts should have to be made by international corporations, countries at the global level. Unless we have to make this kinds of approach, you know, it's difficult only just to address from at the individual level. So we have to take good lessons or examples from Ethiopia regarding this as well. And I am very optimistic that Ethiopia will be in a good manner or in a good way with all aspects of the current dynamics.
Okay, well, it's been good to get a medley of views on this and lovely to talk to all of you. Yared Abera, Marcelo Rezende and Alexandra Jellicoe. I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers.